Namaste and welcome to the Hindu American Dream podcast, where we highlight Hindu individuals in different career paths. My name is Ajay, and I just recently graduated George Mason University with a degree in computer science. Today we have Aditya Patwardhan ji, who is a filmmaker director. Namaste, Aditya ji, and how are you doing? Thank you for coming on the podcast too.
Namaste, Ajay ji. It's an immense pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me over.
Yeah. So I think to start off, do you think you could just give us like a little introduction about who you are, what you do?
So my name is I'm Aditya Patwardhan. I'm originally from Jaipur in Rajasthan in India,
Mhm.
and I have done my bachelor's in computer science there. And after my bachelor's, I started pursuing social media marketing for political parties for local jewelry brands. And while doing that, I realized that filmmaking is something that I want to professionally get into. So I moved to Los Angeles to do my master's in filmmaking. And this was back in 2014.
Mhm.
And it was a 1 year program. And then after the course, I kept getting work. So I stayed back. And for the last 7 years or so, I've been directing and producing movies here in LA. It has been a nice journey. It's like some 25, 30 short films I've done. And over the last 3 years, I've done 4 feature films, three
Oh,
of which are already out, and one is in post production.
okay. Wow, that's great. So I actually didn't know that you had a computer science background. That's pretty interesting to hear. So, like when you were I want to talk about like when you were like younger a little bit, like where, how you grew up, like what kind of things were you interested in, what subjects, extracurriculars, things like that.
So, one of the first things that I loved in art or creativity as such was music. And when I was very young, in the second grade or third grade, I used to think that I want to grow up to be a music composer.
Okay.
And I was good at playing the tabla. It's an Indian percussion instrument. And I picked up tabla, and from tabla I moved to keyboards, guitar, drums. Music stuck with me all the way through my bachelor's in computer science.
Mhm.
And somewhere in the middle of that, I realized that I enjoy watching movies as much as I enjoy music. And a realization hit where I realized that it's not just music composing that I like, but I like seeing what music does to visuals.
Mhm.
What happens if a scene is playing out and I play a certain thing and how it feels. And if I play something else, how it feels. And I think it's somewhere then when I was 14 or 15, when this idea took hold that this is what I want to do, make film things and add music to it and add dialogues, and it will be something interesting and entertaining to watch.
Mhm.
Obviously, I didn't have a clear path in my mind that filmmaking is what I want to do,
Yeah.
but this is where I was at. And once I stepped into my engineering school,
Mhm.
uh, the thankfully my bachelor school was pretty outgoing with extracurricular activities apart from the studies. So I got a chance to form a band, perform through live events across the country, do blogging and photography and public speaking. So all that, in fact, ended up solidifying this idea that filmmaking is something that I want to do, and engineering is definitely something I don't want to do. So I finished my degree, I got a job, but once that much was done, I went back to my parents with this proposal that I have done it till here, and if nothing works out, I'll have the backup of being a software engineer. So let me jump ships, let me do my masters and pay for my masters, and I have a backup. If it doesn't work out, I'll come back and I'll do I'll do what I did the degree in. And yeah, that was the overall journey for the first 20 21 years of my life.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that's pretty great. Actually, that actually sounds very similar to me. Like I'm also very interested in like kind of filmmaking, video editing, and I, graduated with
Awesome.
computer science, so like very
Okay.
similar mindset, I guess.
Mhm.
I was thinking of. Did you like was there like a specific kind of movie that you watched that kind of sparked that interest, or like is one specific moment where it was like, oh, like I like, hearing music in the background, like things like that?
Right. There were three of those that I used to watch. I used to watch a lot.
Mhm.
So one of them was this film by Mani Ratnam called Dil Se. It came out in 1997, 98, I think.
Mhm.
A.R. Rahman was a composer, and I was in third grade and I got hooked to the songs. Like I used to, and those days it was the cassette. It was a cassette that you used to hear in the tape recorder,
Right.
and I used to play the thing like hours on end, going through all the six songs back to back, and
Mhm.
then watching the movie to see what the music does to it. So I was obsessed with the movie Dil Se.
Mhm.
Then there was the film Titanic. which again I was obsessed with. Every drawing book used to be a drawing of the ship Titanic, and everything I talked about was the Titanic for months on end.
Yeah.
And the third was the animated movie Lion King,
Hmm.
which was again the same thing. That I fell in love with the music first, and then the film itself.
Hmm.
And I remember that with Lion King and Titanic's soundtrack, they had the songs, but they also had the background score in the soundtrack which they sold. And I
Hmm.
used to complain even then that why doesn't Dilse have its background score on the cassette? Like, why is it only the songs? Obviously, the songs are amazing, but they'll say the background score is a masterpiece. But it was never released officially because I don't think it's a trend in India to
Right.
do that. But these three were the films that I used to obsess over. Funny
Hmm.
thing is that Dilse and Titanic were not meant for kids who were, of the age
Yeah.
7.
Right.
So every time I was watching the film, my father used to sit with me and forward through things that I shouldn't be watching.
Right.
So both with Dilse and Titanic. Obviously, Titanic,
Yeah.
it was very explicit when it came to sensual content, and
Right.
Dilse was very, very violent because the film is based on insurgency. So it was a violent movie. So I remember watching those two with my father, and Lion King I was allowed to watch on my own.
Okay.
So these three were the films that I would say, were the instigators, at least for me, to get into this field.
Okay. That's really great. So did you ever like make any, kind of small movies on your own, like before you, switched officially to become a filmmaker? Did you ever make any like small movies for your friends, family, when you were younger?
I used to. So with my father used to have a Handycam, a
Mhm.
Sony Handycam, small one.
Yeah.
So I used to make stuff with my Legos and then do small movies with it. Obviously, it was using Legos and the action figures. You know the action figures called GI Joes. They
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
popular back in the day.
Yeah.
So I had a whole bunch of GI Joes and a bunch of Lego sets that I'd merged over the years, just
Hmm.
to set up elaborate like cities or train sets
Right.
or anything. Make a ship out of it, and then use the Handycam to film scenes. But it
Hmm.
was very rudimentary. When I actually started doing this was after my engineering, when I started doing media and social media and promotions for a jewelry company in Jaipur.
Hmm.
So that I had to oversee a lot of branding and all that stuff. So that I started doing stuff on my own then.
Hmm.
And as I was doing that, and I already had a band, so I knew many other bands in the city. So I started offering other bands that, look, I have a camera. If you guys have a song, I can film it for you. So you get a music video, I get a music video, and your song gets released. My video gets released. So, it's a give and take deal. I won't charge you money for filming. You don't charge me money for giving me your song.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of music videos for local bands in Jaipur.
Hmm.
So between the branding work for the jewelry company, music videos for local musicians,
Yeah.
this was the first time I actually started making something to release out to the public, and this was before I did my film school.
Okay. And this was like, I guess, around your undergraduate years, right?
Yes, right. So the last year of my undergraduate and the year after that. So
Okay.
I was 20, 21, that age group.
Right. Okay, that's great. So how did you kind of get your like start professionally, like doing like short films and feature films, things like that? How did you kind of transition into making those kind of films?
So, I mean, when I was doing this in Jaipur, uh, yeah, I forgot to mention, I was also doing social media and social media and campaigning for the party BJP back in India. And this was for the 2013 state elections that the party won. So that was one of the first times that social media was used so heavily in an election campaign. So I was leading the social media vertical for
Oh.
overall online marketing, for online campaigning for the party.
Mm.
So while so that jewelry and the music videos, while that was going on, I found out a course in Pune in Maharashtra,
Mm.
where a teacher from FTII was taking 1 month courses uh, to give a crash course in filmmaking, and you walk out with a 10-minute film of your own.
Mm.
So I took that bet thinking, you know what, I'll try that. It's not very expensive, it's just a month.
Yeah.
So at least I'll know if I do like it or not. So I did that one and thoroughly enjoyed the course. And that's how I took a call to move to the US for my master's.
Mm.
And then right after the school, obviously after finishing my own short film, which is my master's thesis,
Mm.
I started getting offers for directing other people's thesis films. Sometimes it was students or, private individuals who were making short films, but they looked at my work, they must have liked it. And I started doing one short film after another. And obviously the first 3 years were
Mm.
making short films.
Right. Okay, so like basically it was just kind of other students that you knew in your master's, like they would just kind of
Yeah.
ask you to help them out.
Mhm.
Right. And so like yeah, like could you talk about some of the movies that you're making nowadays? Like some of the feature films, I guess, that you've made, like anything like that?
Yes. So feature films for me started in 2017. So the
Hmm.
first one I directed is called A Nomad River, and it's out on Amazon and Apple TV right now.
Oh,
So Nomad River is a docu-fiction based on stories of four characters:
hmm.
a Colombian refugee, an Indian news reporter, a street sweeper, and a singer. And they're traveling across India, which is a fiction storyline. And the story loosely follows Isha Foundation's Rally for Rivers campaign, which
Okay.
was done by Sadhguru
Yeah.
in 2017. So that part is real. So that's why I call it a docu-fiction, where it's, when we are seeing the rally, it's a real event, but the characters we are seeing are fictional characters surrounding the rally.
Okay.
So that I did in 2017, which came out last year.
Hmm.
After that, I directed a psychological thriller called Transference. It was produced by Nicole Cannon. The composers were David Russo and Danny Cannon. So it was basically the team behind Gotham, Pennyworth, and CIS Miami.
Oh,
So
wow.
they were the producers and the principal crew and production company behind the film. And we filmed in Atlanta. It was a proper, small town American horror film.
Hmm.
Now we filmed in Atlanta for a couple of months, and that came out before No Matter Was. So that though it was shot after, it came out before.
Hmm.
That came out in 2020 in August on Amazon.
Hmm.
So that was technically my second feature film, which got released first.
Yeah.
The third one I did was a Korean family drama, a very experimental film about a midlife crisis actor who's going back to his homeland, pondering whether he has failed or not,
Yeah.
and where his friends and family are now
Hmm.
that he's going back after so many years. So we filmed in Busan, in Seoul, in South Korea, and then we filmed some parts of the movie in Los Angeles. So that came out this year on Apple TV. And the fourth one is called The Web of Life, but it's a working title. So, these titles tend to change once the final cut is done. But that was shot in December 2021.
Hmm.
We filmed in Santa Barbara and California. You must have known the actor Corbin Burnson
Hmm.
from LA Law and from many other popular TV series. So Corbin Burnson plays one of the leads.
Hmm.
Aaron Douglas from Battlestar Galactica, he plays one of the major characters. It's
Hmm.
a coming of age, teenage drama about a surfer and his stepbrother set in a beach town.
Hmm.
Typical, stepbrother rivalry, love
Yeah.
story, a very American family drama,
Yeah.
which I directed this one.
Hmm.
So it's already shot and right now it's in post production. So hopefully it should be done by October, and then we'll find out what the release date is.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Like all these movies are kind of different from each other. Like, are you also kind of like writing the scripts for these, or like how's that working?
So I only wrote the script for A Nomad River, the
Okay.
first one. But again, it was docufiction, so a lot of the script writing was more like on the run, where I had an idea of where the story is going, but I used to write it as we got on the day of the shooting, because a lot of the things in the storyline were based on real events. So I also had to make sure it aligns with
Hmm.
the non-fiction part of the story. So I wrote the Nomad River, but the other three were not my scripts. I just directed those.
Okay.
I did write a couple of short films that I was doing after my film school.
All right. Okay. So like, kind of, how does that process work? Like kind of meeting people who are like meeting the writers and like getting their scripts, and like you said, you've also worked with people who like have worked on some of these other major like kind of TV shows, and also like how does that whole like come together like that? I'm sure you were coming out of your master's, like you were kind of relatively unknown in the industry, right? So how do you kind of go from that to working with these kind of big people?
So it's, I mean, film industry. I mean, I'm pretty sure, like many others, film industry is very, network based.
Mm-hmm.
So your work speaks, and your how people talk about you
Yeah.
after your film is what works out. So I made sure after my film school, I was doing every film that was being offered.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone was asking me to direct, I used to say yes, whatever it is. If I need to discount my rates, I would do that. If I could do a trade-off, if I wasn't getting paid enough, but I would make sure that I say yes and I direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gave that, from each set, there's 50 people on the set, and once you direct and it's a good set, the word spreads around that, it was something that worked out well. So I think through that kind of networking, I kept getting work for the first 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
doing a whole bunch of shots. And I think in the middle of that, it was when a couple of known producers noticed my work, and they asked me if I want to direct their feature, and that's how I got Transference. So No Matter What was my own. So I wouldn't say that, it was my own written and produced movie. So I knew what I was doing. But in the case of Transference, it was someone else who saw my work, found out about my work ethic and how am I as a person to work with.
Mm.
And I guess they liked all that and they offered me to direct their feature.
Okay. All right, and then I guess yeah, from there it just goes to the next, networking to the next movies, right? Like
It's yeah, it's usually like that. Yeah, but I mean, I'm realizing when I did my first feature, I thought, finally I'm directing a feature, so I know what I'm doing,
yeah.
and now I know what I like, how I direct. But now that I've directed four, I've realized I don't know anything. it's I'm still at the scratch. It's good that I've tried four different genres.
Mm.
So directing is it's a very evolving field. I'm sure, like with many others,
Mm.
that each movie will humble you a bit more, making you realize that okay, I did not know this or I did not know
All right.
that. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that kind of like leads into my next question. This is like almost like I guess a selfish question, right? I told you I'm a video editor myself, so I'm curious, like,
Mhm.
what is your creative like process like? I know when I've made my like small videos, like just coming up with the idea, then like I don't know, storyboarding maybe a little bit, and like
Mhm.
going through all the different iterations, like it sometimes like a very frustrating process. So what is your
Mhm.
like creative process like?
So usually, I mean, first thing I would sit with the scriptwriter and try to understand their vision completely.
Mm.
Like not give my take at all. I'll try to hear them out, like
Mm.
whatever they have. If they have any visual vision, like some scriptwriters they don't have visual notes. They're like, you know what,
Yeah.
that's your job, you do it. Some scriptwriters they'll write their visuals in the scene.
Mm.
They'll write things like camera goes from this direction and we do a zoom in and things like that. So I'll make sure I understand all that and take my notes.
Mm.
And once that is completely done, I'll let them know that from this point on, if I'm taking over, I'm free to change what I want.
Mm.
Once that is done, the next step usually before uh, storyboarding will be one to check out all the locations that we have to
Mm.
get a good visual sense of the geography of the place, the physicality of the place. That where are we standing? What is visible? Where can the camera go? Where can the actors walk? How much space the actors have to walk? Like anything that's got to do with physical acting and physical location, I'll scout that out
Mm.
and then go back to the script to do an exercise of who's watching
Mm.
each of the scenes. So whenever I'm landing into a scene, I'll try to look for whose POV is it. Obviously, it's the audience's POV first and foremost, but within the story, who's watching the scene? Is it the protagonist? Is it someone else? Is the scene the mom scene or the stepbrother scene or whoever the characters are?
Mm.
And based on whose scene it is, like whose POV I have to put the audience in, so that
Mm.
even if they don't know, subconsciously they are in that person's POV, in that character's POV. I'll find that out, and based on that, I'll structure shots
Mm.
which help me land into the scene and leave the scene. Because the way I land into a scene and the way I leave the scene will determine whose POV it was.
Right.
Once that exercise is done, then comes the storyboarding where I'll sit with the cinematographer if they're already on board. And
Mm.
then we'll scout out the whole scene and see what shots are possible, what's going to look beautiful, and things like that.
Right.
And based on the shots I want, I'll give them to a cinematographer, and then they will make sure they look beautiful. Because sometimes I might have a shot in mind, and it might not be a good looking shot. And
Yeah.
the cinematographer then make sure that it's picturesque. It's photographically aesthetic.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's how generally it flows.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's pretty very interesting to hear how the filmmaking process goes on. So one question I had was like, do you see any difference in the filmmaking process like here versus maybe back in India, if you know anything about the process that they do there?
Uh, I have not worked so much back in India because like I was saying, after I finished my bachelor's in engineering, and I
Mhm.
did a few small projects on my own, and then I moved here.
Right.
So largely my exposure was in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
So, but I'm assuming like what I know from friends and what I've heard, like it's pretty similar.
Mhm.
The filming language is same everywhere, so there's not much difference in the workflow itself, I think.
Okay. Okay. And now kind of going into like the Hindu aspect of the podcast, like how do you feel like your Hindu identity like affects, the movies you make, if at all? Does it, play any like influence like I guess in the stories you pick or things like that?
Uh, how do I put this? Like sometimes my stories or films will tend to have a philosophical or very psychologically introspective touch,
Mhm.
or spiritual touch, which is not directly. I don't want to call it Hindu as a thing itself.
Yeah.
but my stories or things I write uh, have that,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think is a part of the Hindu identity. It's coming from my upbringing. It's coming from what I've heard
Mm-hmm.
right from my childhood and how I grew up and what I've seen in our culture. I
Yeah.
think that reflects in my work. So definitely, Hindu identity is a major part of how I think. Like not only what I portray, but literally how I think and
Right.
how I think about the character and things like that.
Right. And of course, like, have you experienced any like difficulties like being like an Indian like Hindu filmmaker in the industry? Like, were there any challenges that came up because of that specifically?
None at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's never been any sort of obstacle. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, when I was doing a Nomad River, which was because I wrote it and the stories were set in India. Sadhguru was there, and even in the fiction stories, I had a lot of Hindu elements. Like one of the characters, I with them I filmed in the Elephanta Caves in Mumbai, in Ajanta and Ellora, in Aurangabad.
Mm-hmm.
Spoke about the Indian sculpting, the philosophy behind it. One of the storyline follows an Indian classical musician who's in real life a quite famous musician back in India. So we follow him, and through his storyline, we explore classical music. Its links to astronomy, to Indian astronomy. It
Mm-hmm.
links to yoga.
Right.
So they were pretty much through and through Hindu storylines.
Okay.
And even while writing those or filming those or editing and then releasing, I have never faced any kind of resistance because the producers on the movie were all from LA. They were
Right.
Americans, and in fact, all of that was appreciated. So there's never been a resistance. There's actually been encouragement. I
Mm-hmm.
would rather say, if I have tried to show aspects of Hindu culture that I think are not out there.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's like really good to hear. Especially in LA, like I don't know, sometimes you don't expect people to be very accepting all the time, but yeah, that's great to hear.
Yes.
And so, what do you like going off of that? Like, what do you think about like the overall representation of like Hinduism in the film industry? Like maybe in other movies that are being made. Like, what's your comment on that? Like, is there enough representation? Is it correct? Things like that.
And you mean in Hollywood, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, I think like there is, I mean, whenever there has been any kind of Hindu representation in mainstream Hollywood, it has generally been good.
Mm-hmm.
You can discount movies like Slumdog or something of same genre, which obviously was not so great for Hindu culture or India in itself. But uh, having learned filmmaking here, I also agree with whoever's allowed to say whatever they want. There shouldn't be uh, any I shouldn't have resistance to what they are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't like the content, I would rather watch Slumdog for the artistic or aesthetic sense they have. At least there's something to learn in it, which I can use to say my story.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, even without directly naming Hindu cultures, there are multiple movies made here which have paid a homage to our philosophy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, right off the top of my head, like a film like Matrix, all three parts, it was essentially based around Rigvedic philosophy. And they didn't even stop at that. They included the Shanti part mantra in the final fight between the protagonist and the antagonist. There's a whole bunch of mantras in the end credits of the final Matrix movie.
Mm-hmm.
So out and out, the filmmaker knew that what he's making, which philosophy he's borrowing from, and they paid their tribute in the way they knew best. They use Sanskrit chants and stuff. So looking at that, I feel the representation here has been good.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there is way more to talk about. If I was the one to do it, I would, and I was the one to do it, and I wanted to speak about Hindu culture.
Yeah.
Uh, I would make sure that there are scenes set in films which are about the Ajanta and Ellora temples, or a good scene set in the Konark Mandir in Odisha, which
Mm-hmm.
talks about how this temple is not just a temple; it's a working sundial.
Yeah.
It's an astronomy machine that can teach you so much about how the cosmos works. So this astronomical or calendar aspect of Hindu culture, which is not represented at all here or in India,
Mm-hmm.
that's something I definitely feel should be brought to the forefront. Because that's what our culture strength has been since while, logic and science,
Yeah.
much like it was for ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And theirs is usually brought forward very easily. Like, we know the names of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and, Roman astronomy and everything. We know that. We know they were logical in a mathematical community.
Mm-hmm.
But that's never said in reference to Hindu culture. We have yoga and philosophy, which is well advertised and decently popular.
Mm-hmm.
But our culture was based on mathematics, was based on the cosmos, on calendar. those aspects are never spoken. So I think that's something that definitely needs more support and representation out here in the West.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I actually haven't seen The Matrix, so I didn't know it had elements of the Rig Veda. Actually, what kind of like how is it related in that way?
So, have you seen the movie or not?
No, I haven't actually.
So,
I've heard of
I
it.
would.
I'm aware of course.
Okay, so have a look as well. So I won't spoil the movie for you. But
Yeah,
from the get-go, the whole idea is that these people are living in a futuristic dystopian
yeah.
world, and under the surface, and on the surface, it's governed by machines. And
Hmm.
there is this thing called Matrix in which they can upload themselves
Yeah.
and live in this simulation.
Hmm.
So the whole analogy is basically what the Hindu idea of this world is, that it is Maya. So, a different word for Maya in that movie is the Matrix.
Oh, okay.
And every time the protagonist is taught how to control the Matrix, how to make sure you don't get attached to the Matrix,
Mhm.
you see beyond it, you see that it is not real, it is a computer code when you live in it. All the analogies are directly similar to what you will find in Rigvedic sutras.
Oh, wow.
They've gone far ahead. They've even gone to name some of the characters after Indian mythological figures at one point.
Oh, wow.
And the very ending score of the third movie is the chant Astoma Sadgamaya Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya, that
Oh, okay.
Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya.
Uh-huh.
Then there's a shloka out of Vishnu Puran that plays in the end credits.
Mhm.
So that was a very good homage, and I thought that's how representation should be.
Right.
Never did I feel that it was Hindu propaganda. Never did I feel that it was the director trying to sell me Hindu dharma, Hindu culture. None of that. It was a very sincere homage to wherever the director learned all this from,
Right.
without ever making it Hindu or out and out, that this is supposed to be about one culture itself. No, like we see that it's a Western movie. It has lots of references to Oriental and Asian culture as well, to Japanese, to Chinese,
Mhm.
but the central idea of the movie comes from the Hindu concept of Maya and how to see beyond.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's wow. That's very interesting. Like I always knew the basic premise of the movie, but now like hearing this, I think I'm definitely gonna watch it.
Definitely have a look, and it's very subtly done. It's very done with a lot of finesse. Like you'll have to look for it, and I think that's a subtlety that I really appreciate. That's something that West does really well.
Yeah.
Where if they have to sell an idea through a movie, if they want to propagate an idea through a movie,
Yeah.
it won't be blatant. It'll be very subtle. You'll have to look for it. It'll be subconscious, rather than being out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, Another just kind of like I guess this is kind of shifting topics a little bit. Just a little fun question. Like, who's kind of your favorite directors that you like to watch, that you like to maybe take inspiration from in your movies?
Uh, Obviously, like if you count the typical fanboy answer, that would be Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
It's amazing movies. No descriptions needed.
Yeah.
But for more like serious stuff, like something that I would sit and study, it would be David Fincher,
Mhm.
David Lean, Steven Spielberg. Fincher most of all. Like I think David Fincher's films, each and every scene can be analyzed like a film school,
Yeah.
and there's something to learn in every single thing that happens in his movie. Every dolly in, every close up, every dolly out, or a
Yeah.
wide shot, or a close up, or an insert. Everything is so meticulous and well crafted
Yeah.
that it feels like looking at some painting by Michelangelo, or someone of those
Yeah.
someone of that caliber.
Yeah. His movies are like really like just beautifully shot. Like I heard like he doesn't even use handheld shots in anything, right?
Yes,
I heard,
yes.
yeah. Right. So I guess we're kind of like reaching the end of our podcast. Like, do you have any advice for young aspiring like filmmakers? What advice would you give them? How to start? Things like that.
Uh, I think like one of the best things that has happened in the last couple of years, last 4 or 5 years, is that cameras have become very cheap, and phone cameras have become extremely good. Like
Mm.
even if you look at the cameras from the new iPhones, they have a telephoto lens in there. They have a wide lens, a standard 50 millimeter, I think. So at least one thing is easier for people who want to try out filmmaking without risking their entire career, is they can very easily make movies on a phone now,
Mm.
using very basic equipment. So once that is sorted out, looking for the right story is important. Like at least for someone who's trying something out, like they want to jump in the field and see how they feel.
Mm.
This is the only time they can experiment and do whatever they want. So it's very important to choose your first few, even home projects, with something that you really like to show, not get influenced by what's popular or what's out there, something you really want to show. It can be anything. It can be a stop motion film of Lego toys.
Yeah.
It can be GI Joes walking around,
Yeah.
or anything else philosophical or something completely abstract. But those first couple of films will gives one a very good idea of, are they liking it? Are they into it? Do
Mhm.
their family like watching what they made? So
Yeah.
it becomes a very good, sandbox to determine if they want to get into the film, into the field full time or not.
Yeah.
So, that would be my, I guess, my 2 cents, that
Mhm.
try to experiment as much as possible if you're starting out, because, you can fail and it wouldn't matter so much.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, with that, I think we'll end it here. So thank you,
Yeah.
Aditya, for coming on our podcast today. Teaching us about filmmaking and just the overall conversation we had. I had a lot of fun. Is there
Yeah.
anything, any like kind of parting words you want to say, like final thoughts?
I mean, I'm so glad that you called me on the podcast. It's amazing. It's always nice to share my experiences. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing this, and hopefully get to chat again soon, some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so with that, namaste everyone. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next episode.